Hello there, third graders. Welcome to this week's reading lesson, the first part of it. So we have been talking all about text features and functional texts, and we're still going to be thinking about text features when we read books because every time we learn something new about how to understand books better, we always want to hold on to that and keep practicing it no matter what we're reading or when we're reading. But we're going to focus on something a little bit different now. And we've already focused on this skill, but we haven't done it for expository nonfiction books yet. So the skill that we're going to really be practicing and focusing on for the next few lessons is the skill of wondering as we read. And like I said, we have done that already for narrative nonfiction books, for like biographies, but we haven't done it for expository nonfiction books yet. So we are going to practice the skill of wondering to help us understand today as we read this really awesome looking book, Flashy Fantastic Rainforest Frogs by Dorothy Hinshaw Patent and illustrated by Kendall Jan Jubb. So before we get started on this read aloud, I would like you to grab a piece of paper and something to write with. And you can go ahead and pause the video and just restart it once you've got those things. I've got mine here also. And then at the top of that piece of paper, could you write things I wonder, and just underline it. And we're not just making a list of things that you wonder about anything. We're going to make a list of things that you wonder as we read Flashy Fantastic Rainforest Frogs. So the questions are specific to this book. And I will stop every once in a while and ask you to jot down a couple of questions you have at certain parts of the book. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. So first of all, like I said, this is an expository nonfiction book, which means that it's a book that's been written to teach us something. It might look a little different than what you're expecting an expository nonfiction book to look like, because first of all, there's paintings, there's not photographs, and it's missing some of the text features that you might expect in an expository nonfiction book. For example, there's no table of contents. There are no bolded words. There are no diagrams that I can see yet. Even though it's missing those text features, though, it is still expository nonfiction because it gives us lots and lots of true information about a certain topic, which is frogs. So I also want to let you know that in this book, we're going to be learning about the habitat of rainforest frogs. Habitats are places where animals live. And we're going to be reading a lot of books like that in this coming unit when we focus on wondering. This book, Sorry about that. I lost my place. I needed to pause the video for a minute just to remind myself of where I was in the lesson. Okay, so I want you to take a look at the illustration on this page. This is a tropical rainforest, and tropical rainforests are forests with thickly growing plants and trees. These forests are located in warm parts of the earth where a lot of rain falls. Many different kinds of animals, including monkeys, parrots, leopards, crocodiles, and frogs, live in tropical rainforests. Think for a minute, what do you think you know about frogs before we start this book? Okay, so I did some thinking about that too, and I think some things that I know about frogs are that they're a smaller animal, that they're an amphibian. I think they usually eat insects. I think they can live in all different kinds of habitats. I wish I could hear what you think you know about frogs also. It's always important before you start an expository nonfiction book to stop and think for a moment about what you think you already know about the topic, and that way your brain gets ready to learn more about it. Now, based on what you think you know, what do you wonder about frogs that live in tropical rainforests? What questions do you have about them? Okay, so my question is, how are frogs that live in tropical rainforests different than frogs that live in other places? And I also wonder what frogs in tropical rainforests eat. And I kind of wonder where they live. Like, do they live in trees? Do they live on the ground? Do they live in ponds in the rainforest? So those are a few questions that I have just already before we've even started reading anything. Could you pause the video for a moment and on your things I wonder list, just go ahead and jot down one question that you have already about frogs that live in tropical rainforests. And you can restart the video once you've got that question written down. Okay, so hopefully you wrote down a question. I wrote down, and I put a little dot before my question to show that this is one question. I wrote down, I wonder what kinds of homes frogs have in tropical rainforests. You might have written down a different question. That's totally fine. Whatever question you have is great. Okay, let's start reading. The tropical rainforest is a very special place. It never freezes. Instead of summer and winter, the rainforest has a wet and a dry season. Even during the dry season, it often rains. The rainforest looks like a tropical garden. Plants grow everywhere, even on other plants. At the top of the rainforest is the canopy, where trees spread their leaves to gather sunlight. Below the canopy is the understory. The understory is made up of tree trunks, vines, and bushes. The forest floor is shaded by the plants above, so often little grows there. Many frogs live in the canopy and the understory. They may never come down to the ground. Their legs are long and thin for climbing from branch to branch. Their toes have wide, sticky tips that help them cling to the branches and leaves. Other frogs spend their whole lives on the forest floor and never enter the water. They don't need to because the air is so wet. Only a few live in or near ponds and streams. Holy cow. Okay, so my question was just answered. I'm actually going to reread parts of this just to make sure I understand the answer to my question, which was, I wonder what kinds of homes frogs have in tropical rainforests. Okay, it said many live in the canopy and the understory. They may never come down to the ground. Other frogs spend their whole lives on the forest floor and never enter the water. They don't need to because the air is so wet. Only a few live in or near ponds and streams. So my question was pretty much answered that they basically live in the canopy and the understory and the forest floor, and they rarely ever go into the ponds and streams. So this question was answered. I'm actually going to go ahead and circle that question to show that it was answered. Whenever you have a question that's answered during this read aloud, go ahead and circle it to show that your question was answered in the text. All right, I'm going to keep reading. These are great pictures. Most rainforest frogs eat insects. There are so many crickets, moths, termites, ants, and other insects in the forest that frogs have plenty to eat. Big frogs may go beyond eating insects. Some large horned frogs have green and brown bodies that blend perfectly with the forest floor. These frogs don't hunt for food. They just sit and wait. They can eat almost anything that comes their way, even mice and small rats. So third graders, if you have a question that has been answered so far in the text, if one of the first questions you wrote down has been answered, go ahead and circle it. And then also, let's pause for a minute here. We've learned a little bit about frogs already. what other questions do you have from this part of the book about tropical rainforest frogs? Go ahead and write down another question that you have. And you can pause the video to stop and write down your wonder and then restart it once your new question is written down. Okay, so when I was coming up with my question, I reread this page a little bit to think about what it made me wonder. And this sentence here, big frogs may go beyond eating insects. Some large horned frogs have green and brown bodies that blend perfectly with the forest floor. That made me wonder, just how big are these frogs? So I wrote down the question, I wonder how big tropical rainforest frogs can get. Okay, I'm going to keep reading. The disguise of the horned frogs also protects them from becoming food for larger animals. Many small frogs protect themselves by hiding, too. Some have brown patterns that disguise them on tree trunks or among dead leaves. Glass frogs are hard to see on green leaves. Much of their skin has no color at all. It is sometimes hard to see where the glass frog ends and the leaf begins. A few rainforest frogs have a special way to avoid predators. They have big feet with webbing between the toes. Some also have flaps of skin on the sides of their bodies. To escape, the frog jumps in the air and spreads out its feet. The webbing and flaps act like wings and slow the frog's fall as it glides gently downward. When the frog reaches another tree, it can hang on with just one giant toe pad until it can grab with its foot. Okay, so I'm going to stop again here. If you have had any questions answered over the last few pages, go ahead and circle your question. And I had that one question answered, but this one about how big tropical rainforest frogs can get, that hasn't been answered yet, and that's fine. And then go ahead and pause the video again, reread this page to yourself if you need to, and come up with another question that you have about frogs that live in the tropical rainforests. Okay, so hopefully you wrote down a question. The question that I came up with for this page, because I read about how a few rainforest frogs have a special way to avoid predators, that made me wonder, well, who are the predators? So I wrote down, I wonder who the predators of frogs in the tropical rainforest are. Okay, I'm going to read a few more pages and then I'm going to stop one more time and have you think about the questions you've asked and whether or not they've been answered. Come up with one more question, and then we're going to stop the reading for today and we'll pick up again later this week. So I'm going to reread the last sentence from this page. When the frog reaches another tree, it can hang on with just one giant toe pad until it can grab with its foot. Poison dart frogs don't need to hide or escape. They hop fearlessly about on the forest floor during the day. Their bright colors warn predators, "Don't touch me." Only a few animals can eat them because their skin contains bitter-tasting chemicals. Some of these chemicals are very poisonous. Native hunters in Colombia roll the tips of their blowgun darts onto the skin of certain poison dart frogs. The poison will last for about a year. The hunters use it to kill game, but they must be very careful. The skin of one small frog can contain enough poison to kill more than 100 people. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video again here. Take another minute to look back at your questions and circle any that were answered in the part of the book I just read. And then push yourself to write down one more question that you have from the part that I just read about tropical rainforest frogs. And restart the video once you've got that question written down. Okay, so this page just made me wonder, like, is there anything else that the poison from poison dart frogs can do? So I wrote down, what else can poison from poison dart frogs do? Maybe you came up with a different question. All right, so we're going to stop the reading here for today. We'll pick up later in the week. We'll finish the book and write down some more questions and talk about the questions you came up with. Make sure that you hold on to your list of questions, because at the end of this week, I'd like you to take a picture of it and send it to me. And we will add on to this list during the next part of the read aloud. When you are doing your IDR this week, you don't need to write anything down. You don't have a reading journal entry this week, but it would be great if you could practice this skill of wondering. You could just stop every few pages and ask yourself, what question do I have about the part of the book that I just read? Or what do I wonder in this part of the story? Practicing that wondering and asking those questions can really help you understand and kind of get more sucked into what you're reading. All right, thanks, guys. I really like this book. It was really fun to read it with you, and I'll see you later this week. Bye.